So before we begin, we'll just set out some quick ground rules. Number 1, be respectful. Number 2, be self-aware. And number 3, assume good intentions. And that applies to me and Brittany as well as everyone in the audience. Our topic this time round is women in sports. Reason being that women need a voice at the table within the sports industry. We'll start off with some facts, some stats. We could say women who play sports face many obstacles today, such as lower pay, less media coverage, and different injuries compared to their male counterparts. So there are differences within the industry. We could also say that women make up 54% of enrollment at 832 schools. However, only 41% of these are counted as athletes. And then we can think about sports and design. So here's an example of golf hampering women's ability, like the clubs, for example, can be inappropriate for their build, their strength, their level, and swing speed. So this is something that's expands into a wider area of issues. So there are other barriers, including less sponsorship, wages, and visibility within industry and sports, lack of resources for female athletes, including clothing, accommodations, and female-specific medical care, more at risk for on-job harassment, and parental, cultural, and adult influences. There are organisations out there. We found a couple. There's Go Equal, and there's also Women's Sports Foundation, which was actually founded in the 1970s, and that's kind of shows that it's an ongoing issue, and there are barriers, and we need to keep talking about it. And we also have entrepreneurs such as Society 9 who address women's lifestyle boxing, and it's a gear that's suited to women, not just a predominantly male industry. So we've got smaller organizations as well as the big ones. So we've got Nike with their hijab. So this is a good example of a large company addressing athletes who are largely marginalized, with their needs being addressed rarely. And thinking about the hijab, it was looking at a design that was lighter in weight, more suitable for competition, allow the users to hear the surroundings and stay in place reliably. This is actually quite a big deal for those who wear a hijab, and it's something that's been overlooked for a long time. So, I mean, thank you so far, everyone, for joining. We had part 1 earlier today, which included Jasmine Kent and Betsy Barnhart, and in part 2, we have Brittany Pierone, founder of Proof of Concept and previously at Nike. So thank you for joining us, Brittany. I'm going to start sharing my slide and just take over to you. Would you be able to introduce yourself?
Sure. Yeah, so my name is Brittany. I have a degree in industrial design. My passion really is talent development and helping other young people kind of find their lane and run in it. And I'm trying to kind of use my skill set, which is industrial design and visualization, to kind of build a platform and build a brand that kind of verifies that I am everything that I say I am. And then theoretically that helps me to help other people and have the kind of the funding and the network and the reach to help other young people develop. So that umbrella of both brand and passion is called Proof of Concept. And I was at Nike prior, designing sneakers. I now still work with footwear brands all over the country. And yeah, I'm here in Los Angeles doing my thing.
Thank you for joining us. Thanks for that. I guess the biggest, I think what many people are interested in is your experience at Nike. What brought you from Nike to Proof of Concept?
Like what made me transition, or?
So firstly, what it was like at Nike. I think we've got a lot of fans who would love to
Yeah.
know what it's like to work there.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot I could say about what that was like. And I think there's a lot of things that weigh in on what your experience is. So I worked between interning and working, I worked across 4 teams, and I had a completely different experience on every team. So I worked in golf, women's training, running, and then field sports, which is like the NFL and baseball and lacrosse. So running and women's training are kind of more of the high profile categories. They are the business units that are more prioritized. So you kind of have more pressure, but you also have more resources. I had a really interesting first year because I was in color design, which was different than being in footwear. And at the time I was still kind of gunning to get into the footwear role that I wanted. And running was really cool because the company was founded on running. So we were taking like really cool trips. We had like Olympians coming through the office like all the time because a lot of them were training on campus, which was cool. So they would come up and like check in with their coach or check in with like our marketing people. So I got to work on a lot of product for them that like wasn't like published work that people could buy, but just like one of ones for them. Like Mo Farah, Shane Flanagan, I think is her last name. A lot of different guys. That was really cool. And then from there, I really wanted to move into footwear, and I did get that role, and I got moved over into field sports, and I had kind of a completely different experience there because it's a male dominated sport that you're designing for. Running is a genderless sport. So I would say like there was definitely some challenges of having to like prove yourself that you could design for those sports as a female never having played them.
Yeah.
I think the assumption is like you've never played quarterback, you've never played shortstop, like how could what you suggest really matter? So there are like some genuine hurdles I think that you have to get over. I also think any experience wherever you go, whether it's Nike, Coca-Cola, Whirlpool, like who you directly report to is going to basically control your quality of life,
Yeah.
And so you really like, if there's a piece of advice of what I learned from working under several different people is like, don't just take the job or the role because of the title or the potential experience you could get, because your day-to-day could be really miserable if you don't have a really supportive, progressive manager. And that's just it just affects a lot. So yeah,
that's really interesting. You've gone straight into that actually. We've got some really good questions from the audience, and if anyone else has any questions, please feel free to use the Q&A box.
I opened it.
I'll start off with saying, did you ever notice any differences between your male counterparts when working at Nike, or did you notice a difference between genders of managers as well in the way they communicated with you?
That's a hard question to answer as far as the manager thing, because there were great leaders and then there were terrible leaders. And I didn't find that to be like subscribed to gender, because there were some really great women and there were some really great men, and then there was like women that didn't care about other females and their development at all. And then there's definitely a boys club that's just present in the industry, inside of corporate and outside of corporate. Like that's just the reality.
Yeah.
and who decides you're cool, who decides you should move, who decides you're good at, you know, you would be good for a position or not, I think is definitely a real thing. I don't want to say it controls everything, but it is present in the industry. Between me and my male counterparts, if I really had like a big presentation, I would make sure that I always brought another male designer to the presentation.
Wow, yeah.
So that if I got questioned beyond like inquiry, I think, you know, learning to understand, I think women can put their defenses up too quickly because we suffer from PTSD of being like delegitimized.
Yeah.
And that's really hard to like delineate between when you're being delegitimized and when you're just being asked out of like understanding or inquisition.
Yeah.
So I would always bring a male counterpart in the event that like people began to be disrespectful around like the work that was being presented or talked about, because anything that you do on a team comes from the team. You might just be the face. And I say that a lot because designers, like even now when I work with clients, like the client is the client, but they are asking me like, what should we do? What's the next step? What do you like? Why do you like it? So you're constantly having to lead the conversation, lead the project.
Justify your decisions.
And so, yeah.
I mean, that's really interesting that you felt the need to bring in a male counterpart every now and then. I wonder if there's anyone in the audience who's a male and feels that they've ever felt the need to bring a woman back into the conversation.
Good question.
Yeah, shout a yes or no, anyone. I've got a question here, and they're saying, what was it like designing between different genders? So I don't know if it's good for you to pick on a specific type of apparel or equipment, but were there key differences?
I can speak to that now with what I'm going through with proof of concept. I think it's interesting, right? Because right now we're in a very like gender fluid society. And I think that a lot of the like the fashion, footwear, and apparel industry is impacted by how people are identifying themselves now. And like even me as like a straight woman, I wear boys' clothes all the time. And I'm drawn to unisex styles, but it's not, you know, necessarily driven by an identity. It's just driven by an aesthetic. So I would say there are still design needs that are always going to be required because there is differences between the male and female like body and experience. So designing to those, I do think in the case of sports, like for example, one of the projects I worked on right before I left Nike was women's softball. And that was like one of the most inspiring trips I took because they just sent me by myself to Alabama to just immerse myself in like softball culture and like just learn about how these girls play, what they think is dope, for sure what their footwear needs are, and getting to spend time with like other women that are competitors and athletes and like, you know, they love to get dirty, they play as hard as the boys. That was really cool to see, because I think a lot of what corporate can do is just like, we used to call it like the peanut butter effect, where you just like paint this like, you know, generalized assumption about the marketplace instead of understanding that it needs to be sliced a lot of different directions. So working with those girls were so tough and so gritty and such competitors. But then there's like the yoga girl also. And so there's like this spectrum of women to design for, and understanding that and helping men to understand that, because I think men kind of look at women through less facets and they tend to be like, you know, a little bit more just like broad. So I think that that's that's an advantage that female designers have, is we understand how different women can be and being able to design for that. And then when it comes to designing men's product, it's all about listening and driving a vision. Because a lot of dudes just want their stuff to work well and they want to look dope, and it's a little bit more simple. It's less about like self-expression. It's still, that for sure is still there in style, but yeah, just being really attentive to listening to what people's needs are, and then studying the sport and their body.
It's really interesting. I've got a question, well, two questions, I'd say. How are women currently perceived in the sports industry, and do these perceptions match to how women actually feel about sports? So I think you kind of touched on that. Do you think the way women are perceived match what's being made?
Do I think what's being made matches how women actually are? I think there are some small companies doing it really well, like Rothy's out of the Bay. They melted plastic bottles and have knit them into really beautiful like loafers and ballet flats, and I think are going to push into other areas. I think, you know, the niche brands do a really good job of hitting a really niche market, which is, I think, where the industry is moving. I think because everything we have now is so customizable, we want our experiences to be customized to us as well. And so people are going to start shopping like smaller brands that have a deliberate story that resonates with them. So like Rothy's having the innovation of melting the bottles and knitting, and like they just really hone in on one thing, allows them to speak to like a niche market. So I would say some people are doing it really well. I think a lot of larger corporations struggle to genuinely connect with culture, genuinely connect with people groups that they think they're designing for. And I saw that firsthand, and I still see it being removed from big brands.
Yeah. That's really interesting. I say, would you be able to expand on proof of concept? So I know you touched on this, so what led you to proof of concept? I think there's an interesting backstory to this.
Yeah, there is. That it was not really intentional. I mean, it was in my heart for a long time. It was a passion, but when I left Nike and went to Africa, the leap in that was like, I've got to get out of the hype. I felt, even to the comments of the last question, like I felt like there was this major disconnect between like what was broadcast to the world and what was actually happening internally. And that really frustrated me, and it was a negative emotional experience for me. So I cut everything off. I unfollowed people on social media. I literally went off the grid in Africa, with the hope of like finding a sense of purpose, because prior to getting my job, I had wanted that job for 5 years. Even while I was at Nike and wasn't in the role, I was still working for it. And I had been obsessed with like this mission for 5 years. And so I was very used to like orienting around this goal and achieving this like end result. So once I got it, I was like, well, now what? And the idea of a promotion and just climbing the corporate ladder just fell so flat for some reason, like in my heart. And I didn't expect that. I expected the like hunger to just go to like stay with me. And I really lost it. I lost pretty much at 24 and 25. I pretty much lost all of my ambition, because I was really defeated by the experiences that I was having. and it didn't make sense for me to like grind and then just go on PTO and like go on vacation and then come back to this grind. Like that model for me from a lifestyle standpoint just didn't make sense.
Mhm.
And I was like, everything I do has to add up to a greater purpose. And I was so used to that like manner of operating for 5 years, where everything I did, even if it wasn't directly like, oh, I'm going to work on this sneaker, it was like, oh, I'm going to model a coffee maker because it's going to show this skill set and it's all going to add up to this like greater mission. So I was like, my life doesn't function like that anymore. And now I'm just on this like very like sliced and diced, like compartmentalized life experience, and I wasn't enjoying it. So the idea of going to Africa was like, what if I can find a way where the work that I do as a designer then becomes more purpose driven to help other people. And I had traveled all around Asia, so I had seen a lot of other global experiences that are just so far from what we know in America, or, you know, really just what I grew up seeing. So going there was about absorbing what other people go through and then potentially finding a design solution that could help support, you know, them or the need of resources. And so I was like, I basically need a new dream. I need a new like archetype. I need a new blueprint that's going to help drive like what my day-to-day actions are.
Yeah.
So when I came back from Africa, I had started a project for a friend and a colleague. And when I finished that, I was like, wait a minute, if I can figure out like how to build products for him in Los Angeles, then I can definitely do it for myself. So then I launched this whole thing of doing like a customized business, because I know how much custom product is like dope to people, but it's very difficult to run a profitable business doing customs because you just don't make a lot of money. And it's a ton of work because nothing is the same. So you're reinventing every time.
Yeah.
So then I was trying to trademark that name, which is my last name. It was just a different spelling. It was like original family spelling. Trademark got put on hold for literally like a year, and I couldn't produce until that was legally resolved between me and like between my lawyer and like the opposition. So then I was on this walk during quarantine, and I was listening to this podcast, and this guy was like, you know, everybody wants endorsement and or investment, but nobody wants to do a proof of concept that they're worth that investor. And when he said that term, proof of concept, it rung a bell, because in design school we would have deliverables, and the last deliverable of like every project was this proof of concept model that would show that like our idea would work. So of course I go home and I look up and I'm like, I got to get the rights to this name. Long story short, the guy that owned it didn't refile. I was able to slide in and get it. And so to me, proof of concept is the perfect name because the word concept. As an industrial designer, I want to be able to make products. I don't want to be making like apparel. I don't necessarily want to be another streetwear brand. I want to make footwear. I want to make furniture. I want to make housewares. I want to just make concepts and innovation for everyday life. And I love the idea that young people, you know, anywhere from like 18 to like 25, 26, are sort of unproven in the marketplace. When you come out of school, or let's say you go to school for finance, but you're a creative on the other like side of your life, but you don't have a job, it's not necessarily on your resume, you're sort of conceptually you're a creative, but you don't really have anything in the world that like validates, okay, this person knows what they're doing. And I think a lot of times it's difficult for people to get from A to B. Like, I want to do this, but I don't really know how to get the job or develop the product or launch a project. And so I would love to help be that liaison of helping people like put together a portfolio, follow these steps, learn Illustrator, learn Photoshop, learn, you know, about, you know, data analytics and how it can inform your design solutions. Like just help people get the information that they need. And so I'm calling that sort of talent development, and that, you know, if you just believe in people, they really get the energy to kind of chase their goals. So it kind of houses both those ideas. And it was a long journey. Like I just have been through stuff in the last even 2 years that have helped inform the direction that I'm going. Because originally it was like, oh, I want to build orphanages because I love children. But then it was like, oh, you love design, so you should probably talk about design and like help young people. So that is proof of concept, and I'm looking to launch kind of my first stuff here in the fall, which I'm pretty excited about.
That's really exciting.
Yeah.
All the best for you. I mean, it sounds really good. Do you think the experiences of having good leaders in previous work has helped you to become a leader?
Definitely.
Are there any key learnings from that you apply to yourself from those experiences, like what you're trying to output?
I mean, there's a lot I could say about that. I mean, I've had some really incredible mentors, and I've worked for some really amazing people. The thing that I've learned from them is how, like, what about them inspires me to like get after it. And that is like a secret sauce, I think, as like a manager or as a leader, is how do you like light that fire in the team underneath you, because you can't do everything yourself.
Yeah.
And most people want stuff done at like a certain level. So how do you really like, coerce is the wrong way, but like how do you get people to go? So I've taken a lot from them on like, how do you inspire people? How do you motivate people? When you get people to believe in themselves, that's when I feel like they really start to like run at their own pace. And that's really cool to see, because I think you see people go from like kind of sauntering through their work to like grabbing it by the horns and like taking it to the next level. So I would say that's mostly the thing that I've gleaned from, is making people feel valued, seen, and believed in.
That's great. I think you've answered the question already, really. There's a question from the audience. How do you make those around you become an advocate for women in design and designing for all genders? It's a tricky question.
I don't see it in the, how do you make those around you become an advocate for women in design? I mean, I think work is really always the thing that I come back to. And a lot of my mentors always say that is like, the more you focus on the output and the talent, that's when people really start to get excited, and you want to be the designer that everybody wants to work with. And that's not by posts on Instagram of like your cute face. That's like, wow, she's amazing at insights and translating them into design solutions. Like your portfolio and your work really is what opens doors for you. And sometimes it's better even to be like anonymous, you know, like for example, let's say you made something and somebody in the company, like if you're within a corporate structure, somebody within the company just like has this like shoe on their desk, and then it's like, whoa, what is that shoe? Where did it come from? And nobody really knows. And then someone's like, oh, Brittany did it. Oh, Brittany did it. You know, like that really is like, oh, well, we want her over here. And that was kind of what happened when I did this thing. When I got to Nike, I wasn't in a footwear role yet, and I had access to like a 3D modeler, and I was working on this idea with him, and this went all the way up to the CEO of Nike at the time, and I technically was like a contractor, and I had like 4 of them printed, and I dyed them in like weird colors. And I had a couple mentors that like kind of gave me access to some of the facilities at Nike that were like more proprietary. So I just would like go in there and like make stuff and like do this. So this, nobody knew that this came from a female, you know.
Right.
It was like, what is that? And like, it didn't even, I mean, it's just a floppy outsole. Like it didn't, it was such an incomplete idea. It was just, it was a proof of concept.
Yeah.
And then this got around, and then it was like, oh yeah, that girl Brittany did it. And then I ended up getting a job off of it.
That's great. Do you
So,
think, sorry, go on. Were you going to say something?
oh no, just at work, you know, concepts are really what catch people's attention. Because at the end, people want to see cool stuff. That's the bottom line. So, yeah.
That's great. Do you think you felt different being a girl? Do you ever feel like you need to try harder? Because I only ask because that's something that came up in part one of this talk, where sometimes some women in some industries feel they need to stand out to be considered for the role, whereas it feels as though many guys can just sort of walk into a role.
Oh yeah. Yeah. The what I would say is like women are judged on their performance and men are judged on their potential. And that's the reality of it. I think there are definitely progressive leaders in the industry that definitely believe in people's potential. I'm a case of that, where my mentors through college were like that. But then once I got in the Nike system, like all of that kind of fell to this wayside because I didn't have a good manager. But yeah, I feel that way now. Like everything I do as a creative that's for a professional project and not just a passion project, I'm like, it's got to be better. It's got to be better. It's got to be better. Because of the fear of losing the income if it's not, you know, there's a level, like I said, of like boys club that's still out there.
Yeah.
Even not within corporate, that like, you know, if you're cool, it doesn't really matter, you know.
Yeah.
I think women have to come out from underneath something. We are never just seen eye to eye. Like, and I struggled with that a lot working in sports because I'm not the prettiest girl in the room, but I'm not the ugliest girl in the room either. And so how people look at you for what you are, especially if you dress cool also, then people are like, who is that? And why are you here? Or like, just there's just so many other questions. And then guys start looking at you from like a dating lens or other endeavors, and you're not given a chance to be a brain first. And so then you become reduced to a body and a face. And so I feel like I'm constantly fighting to be seen for what I create and what I contribute over like, well, Brittany's here and she's somewhat cute and she can dress kind of okay. Like that, you know, I feel like we're constantly having to overcome that. And then if you, let's say you have no swag and you have no beauty, but you're smart as a whip, like men will also reduce women in that way, where it's like, well, what could you know? You know, or like, I'm surprised, kind of like when people say to Black people, like, oh, you speak so well. It's like, the hell does that mean? You know, like, so that is the same with women, I think, where it's like, why are you surprised that I could come up with that?
Yeah.
And you're making these judgments off of the external optics, whatever the optics are.
Yeah. I hear you. I mean, I experienced that myself. I don't work in sports, I work in packaging, but it's an industry with a lot of guys. They're all lovely guys, but you have to kind of show that you can do something before you're allowed to do it, as opposed to just being able to try. Yeah.
Like my friend works at Honeywell as an industrial designer, and she designs like cockpits for airplanes. And one of her male coworkers said to her, she was working on like the center console area or something, or whatever like that center area is. I guess they don't have consoles in planes, but whatever. And he was like, don't you need somewhere to put your purse? And she was just like, really, bro? So that's the kind of stuff that it's like, this is really what we deal with.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I hear you. We've got a question from the audience again. We've got, what does your day-to-day look like developing your brand currently? You show awesome process through your social media, by the way.
Thank you. My day-to-day is managing headaches and fires. My day-to-day is just remaining to drive and stick to a vision. I think that's the hardest thing about launching something. And when you're an industrial designer or a creative, picking a direction and sticking with it, which is paramount for a successful brand, is really hard. Because I have so many ideas, I have so many things I want to explore, and getting the public at large to digest something is they only can handle one thing at a time. Like if you look at any brand, they, for a season of time, it's like one campaign, you know, like at Nike, it was like just equality and equality, 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 or Air Max, Air Max, Air Max, or like if you're familiar with Common Projects, the little footwear brand, like he put out just the Achilles for years, and like now he's doing other things, but like he's known for that one thing. So it's really important to drive like that one thing home. So for me, it's all about like, you know, editing that and refining that and then sticking to it, and then looking at the business of it and like how does it become profitable, what can I afford to put in that will get me the right output, and like really, you know, start defining myself in the marketplace as like this highly crafted, really refined aesthetic that I'm going for. So it's a lot of different things. It's a lot of business more than creative, especially right now.
Yeah.
Because the idea part is easy. It's picking which one and then how to make it and how to make it profitable.
Yeah. I guess from that, do you ever, not necessarily gender-based or anything, but do you ever face any difficulties throughout that process? Are there any barriers that keep coming back at you?
Yeah, I mean, as far as gender-based, it's very hard. Basically, as a small brand, you have to get your stuff out there for people to see. So whether that's a billboard or giving it to high profile or highly followed people, and then getting them to tag the brand or give people credit, it can be hard because people want favors in return that a lot of times are unprofessional and immoral when it comes to business.
Yeah.
And that's been the hardest hurdle for me, is that I'm consistently blocked by, I'll support you if you do this, that, and the other. And that's not fair. You know, you should just like the product and you should just support, you know, if you want to buy a backpack, there shouldn't have to be anything else that comes with, you know, with the product. So it's very real. That's just something I'll never front about or polish over.
I mean, like recently there's been a lot more adverts from sports brands and all sorts of banks and things kind of geared towards, I think it was, just got questions here. Just like sponsorships and trying to promote more women into soccer, more women as athletes. I guess to keep it from being just a fad, what do you have any ideas or any suggestions for it to become a prolonged thing, but to make it a movement and not just a little trick to make more money?
You mean sponsorships or promoting women?
Promoting women.
I mean, I think we have to be amazing and we have to support each other. Like,
Yeah.
you know, regardless of gender, you should be amazing at what you do. And that's really when you start to, you know, like look at Beyonce, like she's the best at what she does. And um, I know she will forever run into, you know, probably sexist issues, but she also like is, you can still reach the ultimate. So I think, you know, if we just continue to be amazing and find the allies, then I think slowly, you know, when the work starts to get out there, that's when the needle starts to shift. Because not that that work hasn't been there before, but we have to do a better job of supporting each other and finding men that vouch for us and support us so that we are heard and seen. Yeah.
I guess this kind of rolls into the next question. How do you overcome situations that have made you feel belittled in any way? Or how have you overcome situations where people have tried to put their foot in the way?
I've gotten pretty good at walking away from stuff. I think it's hard because there are a lot of like roles or projects that I've wanted to work on, but I can tell that the like genuine respect is not there. And so I have just declined the project, and I've just believed that, you know, my talent will continue to bring in other opportunities, and it has. So I would always tell women to believe in yourself enough to walk away when just your intuition or your gut is like, this isn't going to go right. It could be with money. It could be with the dynamic. It could be with people just expecting you to deal with BS that you shouldn't have to deal with professionally. So when I have run into situations that are very defeating, like even Nike, I walked away from that. I mean, I quit my job. So be willing to I don't know, take it as far as you want to take it. For me, that was the right decision. But as far as recovering from it or taking care of myself in that process, I spend a lot of time on myself, which is like working out and doing the things that add value to me and my quality of life. Right now, I'm like literally redoing my portfolio again, which I never thought I would do, but I'm doing it again. And just continuing to reinvent myself and package myself in a way that I want to bring in. You're constantly like, if you think of yourself as like a fisherman, like throw your line out there, your portfolio is your bait, and you're going to reel in a lot of different things. And you may want to keep a fish and eat it and eat off of it and be happy. There might be some diseased fish that comes in that you don't want. Let it go, like let it go back in the ocean, you know. But that process of continually, like, don't ever stop throwing your line out there and reinventing what that motion is, and like what that bait, you know, reinvent the bait, reinvent what draws people to you, reinvent what you add value to yourself so that you keep growing and, you know, elevating the work that's going to come to you. Even if it's making stuff up, you know, whatever the case may be, just continue. I always come back to myself and to my faith and just believe.
There's some wise hitting words there. I love the fishing analogy. I think that's really easy to grasp. We've got a little bit of time for more questions from the audience. I've got one here, one from EJ, who says, where do you see proof of concept in the future?
I'm not really sure what that means, but I would love to see concepts in like retail experiences. I think that like, I would love to have like my stuff in certain boutiques. and I am excited for it to kind of hit the ground and kind of just catch the traction.
Awesome. I think we'll sort of round it up now, but is there anything that you'd like to mention? Anything that you think you want to talk about before?
No, I mean, my thing to women is just don't ever quit. You know, I think we get defeated a lot because we pour our everything into what we do.
Yeah.
We're smart, we're intelligent, we're analytical, we deep dive, and we're passionate. And I think a lot of times when you invest in work, and then it's like dismissed or slighted or delegitimized, it can take the wind out of your sails. And I have a million of those experiences. You know, there a couple weeks ago I had like 4 major experiences of that in 1 week, and I just ended up in like a heap in my apartment, like just enraged. And and I would just tell women, like, you know, like my screensaver on my computer is like, don't stop for anything, girl. And then my screen on my lock screen is what's my next step, you know. And I just constantly focusing on where do I step next, and where am I going to get the experiences that again add value to me as a designer, and teach me to be greater and elevate. But I just don't want people to quit. That's my thing. Just don't quit. A lot of people quit too soon because it's hard and it's defeating, but just don't quit.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much, Brittany, for your wise words and
always. Thank you for having
insights.
Yeah.
We'll end it here, but thank you so much for your time.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you to the audience for your insightful questions.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, keep going, women.
See you next time.
See you next time, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.